Welcome to Kahani Bar. Kahani Bar is a cocktail of stories in English and in Hindustani. I am Payal, and today I am going to share a story by none other than Rabindranath Tagore, a great Indian poet, philosopher, social reformer, and also a Nobel Prize winner in literature. The story is called The Professor. The professor was a man who had a curious hobby. He liked to pose as a man of great learning. His knowledge, however, was of very harmless kind and never did anybody any real harm except himself. He had read a great many books in his life, but he remembered very little of what he had read. Still, whenever he spoke, he quoted from those forgotten books with such confidence that no one ever doubted him, unless one asked questions. And then the professor immediately changed the subject. He wore large spectacles, a stiff collar, and carried an umbrella under his arm at all times. These things, he believed, completed the appearance of scholarship. The professor had one great weakness. He loved attention. When he walked down the street, he imagined that people stopped to look at him. When he entered a room, he felt that everybody whispered, "There goes the learned man." Naturally, the professor was a very happy man. One day, while walking down the main street of the town, the professor saw a small crowd gathered under a tree. Being very fond of crowds, especially crowds that might listen to him, he hastened to join them. There, on the mat, sat a wandering Vaidya, a traveling herbal doctor displaying bottles of colored liquids. He was loudly praising their miraculous powers. The crowd listened with great seriousness. This annoyed the professor. "What foolishness!" he muttered. "These ignorant people will never learn." He pushed his way to the front and announced in his most impressive voice, "Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to inform you that all these so-called medicines are useless, worthless, absolutely unscientific." The crowd turned to look at him. The Vaidya stared. The professor, encouraged by attention, continued, "In my vast studies covering philosophy, chemistry, botany, and the healing arts, I have never found such absurd concoctions. You are all being deceived." The Vaidya quietly asked, "Sir, may I ask what your own knowledge of medicine is?" The professor drew himself up. "You may ask," he said with dignity, "but it is impossible for me to answer such a question in few words. My knowledge is too extensive." The Vaidya smiled. The crowd murmured. Someone said, "If he knows so much, let him prove it." A man stepped forward with a sick child in his arms. "Babu Moshai, can you tell us what is wrong with my boy?" he asked the professor. The professor suddenly felt extremely hot under his stiff collar. He had not expected practical questions. The Vaidya folded his arms. The crowd waited. The professor cleared his throat. Then he looked sternly at the child as if diagnosing something very deep. "My good man," he said at last, "this is a difficult and delicate case. To understand it properly, I must examine the child in private. Bring him to my house this evening." The man bowed gratefully. The professor walked away quickly for fearing someone else might ask him something impossible. On returning home, he was very uneasy. "What shall I do when the man brings a child?" he wondered. He paced up and down the room, wiping his forehead. Evening came, but no one arrived. The professor waited and waited. Finally, he sent a boy to the man's house to call him. The boy returned and said, "Dada, the man said that after you left, the Vaidya gave the child 1 spoon of medicine and he became perfectly well in 5 minutes. The professor sighed deeply. The next morning, he avoided the main street and went by the lanes, hoping no one would see him. But unfortunately, a group of boys saw him coming and began whispering loudly. "There goes the professor. Ask him what is wrong with your headache. No, ask him what about my stomach ache and my broken shoe." The professor hurried away in great discomfort. From that day, he became very quiet. He still wore his spectacles and stiff collar and still carried his umbrella. He still quoted from books he had forgotten. But whenever he saw a crowd gathering under a tree, he instantly turned around and took another road. And people said, "The professor has become a very wise man at last." That's all for now, folks. Like the famous Greek philosopher Socrates once said, "Awareness of ignorance is the beginning of wisdom." This is Payal signing off. Until then, ponder over this and take good care of yourselves. Until we meet again for the next story.